Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. And today you're going to be watching another book review of this book right here, which is Shoe Dog by Mr. Phil Knight. This book came out on April 26, 2016. The suggested retail on this one is $30 US and 39 Canadian, or basically 40 Canadian. It's also 386 pages. So let's jump into it. So this book starts out with Phil Knight graduating from Stanford with an MBA, and he doesn't really know what he wants to do. Basically how I am right now. So, maybe there's some type of correlation there, maybe not. I don't know. But he was a very adamant runner, and he liked running marathons and, like stuff like that, long distance running. And he also said back then that, nobody really ran for fun. Like, you had to be like a weirdo or like a maniac, basically, was the word that he used to go out and run for fun. Because remember, this is like the 1960s, 1970s. So, he said that basically everybody just smoked. And he said that heart disease hadn't been discovered yet. So he wanted somehow to change the shoe market, right? He knew that shoes weren't really optimized for running. So he went to Hawaii with his friend Carter on like a soul finding, basically a soul finding trip. And he gets a job as an encyclopedia salesman. And he basically fails horribly at it. So he continues to go around the world on his trip, and he eventually ends up in Japan, and where he meets with this company called Onitsuka. And I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, whatever, but that's the way I interpret it, right? And basically what happens is, they sell shoes, right? And he meets with the owner, and he asks if he can sell their shoes in the U.S. And they said yeah. And in that meeting, they asked which company that he worked for. And he said that he was thinking, because he didn't know, he thought they would say yeah, and they wouldn't ask any other questions, right? So he was thinking, and then he thought back to his room, like his bedroom, and he saw that there were blue ribbons on the wall, or he remembered that there were blue ribbons on the wall. And he said, blue ribbon. And, that was the first thing that came to his mind. So whatever, they say yeah, and he gets back home and he waits for the shoes to get to his house. In the meantime, he gets a job as like some type of accountant or whatever it is. So the shoes come in, and he sends a pair to his old coach when he was running, and his name was Bill Bowerman. And Bill Bowerman was the most famous track coach in the States at the time. So Phil partnered with him, and they each split the money to order the shoes, and they ordered 300 pairs for $1,000, which is actually pretty, cheap, because then you're paying what, like, if I'm not mistaken, it's like $3 a shoe or something like that. So it's $3 for one pair of shoes, and if I'm not mistaken, they were selling them for like $25. So look at the profit right there. Anyway, so they also split the company 51 to 49, and Phil got the 51%. So Phil got $500 from his dad, and his dad was very hesitant to give it to him because his dad wanted him to be an accountant and not some shoe guy or whatever you want to call it. So that was what his dad wanted him to do. He wanted to be a shoe guy. His dad wanted him to be an accountant. Kind of the typical problem, I guess you could say, that a lot of young people run into in their 20s and possibly even into their 30s. So every year, their sales are doubling, and they're still strapped for cash because all they do is they sell shoes and then they order more shoes, right? So they weren't really saving any money. They were just selling and buying, selling and buying. And to make the problem worse, Onitsuka, they were very slow in delivering their shoes. And their communication, because back then it was just like letters. There was no email. I think phones were probably around, but it was probably very limited. It was probably very expensive. So it took a while for companies to communicate, for people to communicate. So during this time, Phil hires his friend Jeff Johnson, who would be I guess you could say, a salesman. And this Jeff Johnson guy, he was very, from what I read in the book, he was very annoying, because basically what he did was he told Phil every single detail in the form of letters. So Phil would have a stack of letters just from Jeff Johnson, right? And it would be every development, every sale, everything. And Phil rarely ever replied because he also thought that Johnson was being very annoying, right? But Johnson wanted to open a retail space in LA, and Phil challenged him. Phil said, if you can sell 3,250 pairs of shoes, then you could open your retail space. And Jeff Johnson did that. Even after he broke his skull, in like an accident. It was like some car accident or something. He did that. So they eventually opened the retail space in LA. Then basically what happens is they run into some legal issues. And this guy named the Marlboro Man, I'm not sure where that name really came from, but that's what they called him in the book. Apparently he said he has the rights to sell the shoes from Onitsuka. So he has the rights to sell them on the East Coast, but they're on the West Coast. They're like Oregon, California area. So Phil goes to Japan and he has a sit down with the company Onitsuka where he said that he wants to become the only distributor for them in the US. And they say yeah, and whatever, and sales double again, so everything was going good, but he still couldn't afford to take a salary from Blue Ribbon because again, money was tight because all they were doing is they were buying and selling, and then when they would sell they would buy more because that's how high the demand was. So basically what he does is he gets an accounting job that takes up 6 days a week, but it didn't really leave him any time to grow Blue Ribbon and stuff like that. So he takes a teaching job that pays $700 a month at Portland State University. And while he was teaching there, he also met his wife, or his future wife, Penny Knight. And basically what he does is he hires her to do like accounting stuff and like bookkeeping, typing, like communication with probably Johnson or whoever, like just like accounting stuff. So in 1969, sales double again, and then he could finally pay himself a salary of $18,000 a year. So then he decides to quit his teaching job. And in the last few days on campus, he meets an artist named Carolyn Davidson. And basically what happened was he overheard her talking in the hallway saying how she couldn't find work, and because she was like an artist and stuff like that. And basically what he did is he hired her and he tasked her with creating a logo for their company. So now there's a new guy from Onitsuka, because I guess, they went through like restructuring or, whatever you want to call it. And it was this guy named Kitami. And basically, he comes to the US, and when they go to the bank, he causes trouble, right? He demands that the bank give them more money, and he was just like, he was being obnoxious, basically, was the word that he used in the book. And basically what happened was, the bank kicked him out, and they said that they didn't want their business anymore. So, they go back to the warehouse with the Kitami guy, and he said that Phil isn't handling the company properly. And basically what he did was he gave them an ultimatum. He said that he wanted to buy 51% of Blue Ribbon, and Phil didn't want to do that. So Phil made up an excuse, and he said that he just wanted to talk to his other co-owner, Bill Bowerman, who had the 49%, about selling 51% of the company to them. So in 1972, they announced Nike at the National Sporting Goods Association in Chicago. And, they bring their bright signature orange boxes, like the one right here that the book is sitting on. And basically what happened was Onitsuka, the people from Japan, they told the public that they had bought 51% of Blue Ribbon to try and get Phil to sell the 51%. So they tried to make it seem like they had already acquired it, even though they didn't, to pressure Phil into selling the 51%. So at this point, they're basically two companies, but like nobody knows about Nike. Everybody only knows about Blue Ribbon. So they didn't tell their supplier, the Onitsuka guy, or the Kitami guy, about Nike. So, basically what happens is like the convention or whatever goes on, the boxes look nice, but he said that the shoes look terrible because they had gotten samples from another factory. But he said that even though the shoes looked terrible, people were still buying them. So then the Kitami guy finds out about Nike, and basically what happens is he comes to confront them about it with their lawyers. And basically they go through a whole lawsuit, and things don't really look good. Then they would eventually go on to win the lawsuit, but then they would run into money problems. Just like what I said before, the Bank of California didn't want their business. And basically what happened is that, their factory workers, like all their checks bounced. The checks bounced from all their creditors, and basically what happened is the Bank of California didn't want their business anymore, like I said, and they took their business to this Japanese bank, or I'm not sure what it was, but I don't know if it was a banker or if it was a guy or whatever it was. But it was this, I'm gonna call it a bank. It was a Japanese bank named Nisho. So sales double again to 14 million in 1976. And basically what they want to do is they want to push their business to China. And they end up striking deals with factories in China, and things are looking good. But Bill Bowerman, he wanted to have more of a role in Nike. And so he came to Phil and he said, you know what, Phil, I want to sell 2/3 of my share and of his share like in the company. And Phil said, he didn't want to, but he reluctantly accepted. So then in 1980, they get hit with a $25 million lawsuit from the U.S. Customs Office, which they eventually talked down to $9 million. Basically what happened was they weren't paying their import fees like from all the shoes that they imported, and it basically just piled up until it was eventually 25 million. So they ended up talking it down to 9 million, and they ended up just paying it off. Phil didn't want to pay anything, really and truly, but he just paid it just to get the government basically off their back. From then, Nike is pretty much like made. It's pretty much established. It's grown into the brand that I don't want to say we all know and love, but the brand that I know and love. That's pretty much it after that. 2006, I think, Phil stepped down as CEO. Because I guess he was getting old or whatever the case is, or maybe I think he's like 80 something years old now. So back then he would have been like 70 something. So I guess he was probably just getting old. He wanted to just enjoy the rest of his life. That year in 2006, Nike's sales were 16 billion that year compared to Adidas's 10 billion. LeBron actually, when LeBron signed with Nike in 2003, he gave Phil a Rolex from 1972, and it was engraved with the words "Thanks for taking a chance on me," because as you know, Nike took a chance on LeBron, and now LeBron is probably their biggest athlete behind Kevin Durant and all these other guys. But yeah, so, and then when Michael Jordan's dad passed away, Michael Jordan reserved a seat in the front row for when his dad passed away for Phil, right? So Phil was in the front row of Michael Jordan's dad's funeral, because that's how much Phil sees these guys. Phil basically sees them, as family. Then in 2000, to backtrack a little bit, Phil's son Matthew, he unfortunately passed away in a scuba diving accident. Obviously Phil and Penny, his wife, are devastated. Every Nike athlete contacted them, obviously, to send condolences and stuff like that. But Tiger Woods was actually the first one, and he called Phil at 7:30 in the morning, and Phil said that he would obviously never forget that moment, because Tiger's obviously signed with Nike. I think that was before the whole thing with Tiger and cheating on his wife, and he had all these women and all that kind of stuff. But that's another conversation for another video. Bill Bowerman unfortunately passed away in 1999 in his hometown, and Phil said that he was crying so much that he gave up on the tissues and he just draped a towel over his shoulder. And that's basically it. So that was basically the whole story of what happened in this book. But I mean, if you know me, if you watch my videos, you can probably tell that I am a very big fan of Nike, from my hat, my sweater, my everything, right? I don't know why. I don't know if it's the swoosh. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just because I'm a big fan of LeBron. I don't know what it is. This book was the best book that I read, minus the Elon Musk book. And I don't know how, I don't know why. Like I said, I don't know why I like Nike. I just do. If you're a fan of Nike, I highly, highly recommend this book. And if you're a fan of just a story that was, this story is almost magical, right? I don't know why that word just comes to mind, but it's just I don't really know what to say. Everything fell into place so perfectly that it was almost like a movie, right? From going back and forth with his dad, to going to Japan, or to going to Hawaii, then to go to Japan, to travel around the world, to start a shoe brand. Then, you get legal troubles, and you go back to Japan. You ask them if you could sell. Then they say yeah, and then you go through all these money problems. And it's like Phil Knight's life was literally like a movie. I don't know how, I don't know why, but this book, like, I know a lot of people recommended Shoe Dog. Like, I've seen a lot of people recommend it from, they said it's like a really good story and stuff like that. But I didn't think it would be this good. This is the second best book that I've read, minus the Elon Musk book. And, just like bottom line, I highly recommend it. I very, very highly recommend it. If you're a Nike fan, if you're a fan of like business stories and how like, things came together and, stuff like that. And like there are no business like tips in here. Like he's not going to tell you how to start a business, how to run a business. This is his story of everything, how Nike came to be. And now it's, this obviously this global brand. But if you're interested in it, like if you're interested in Nike, if you're interested in business and like a good business story, I highly, highly recommend this one. The next book actually that I'm going to be reading is right here. So the next book that I am going to be reading is this book right here, which is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Mr. Stephen Covey. This apparently is a very good book. I've heard and seen and read about. This is apparently a very good book. It has been on my list for a while. So this is book number 8 actually, because I read Crush It by Gary, Thank You Economy by Gary. Then we had Elon Musk. Then we had Crushing It by Gary. Then we had the Covey book. Then we had 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. Oh, actually, this is book number 9. Yeah. Because then we also had the Little Book of Financial Wisdom. So yeah, so this is actually book number 9 for the year. And I remember I started out with a goal of reading 12 books for this year. I wanted to read 1 book per month, but now we're actually on book number 9. But we'll see how long this one takes me, because I know for sure this one is probably more complicated than Shoe Dog. Shoe Dog, at the end of the day, it was just a story, whereas this book is actually like you have to pay more attention in this book, because this is a book that you actually have to understand and try to implement things in your daily life. But to kind of close it off, Shoe Dog was very good. I highly recommend this. If you're, like I said, a Nike fan, a fan of a good business story, fan of a good story in general, highly recommend this one. But, yeah, that's pretty much it. As always, thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch my video. It is very much appreciated. All relevant links are down below. And you can buy this book. I'll link it down below on Amazon. It's not affiliated. I'm not sponsored or anything like that. This is just a very good book that I highly, highly recommend. But yeah, that's pretty much it. As always, thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch my video. It is very much appreciated. All relevant links are down below. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you next one. Phil was at the front row, or I should say Phil was in the front row of I was about to say Michael Jackson.